When the lifeline of a nation's economy is struck at its very core, panic does not just ripple, it explodes into chaos. Today, Moscow finds itself at the edge of an economic nightmare, as a devastating surprise attack has crippled one of Russia's main oil refineries. This is not just an attack on infrastructure, it is a direct strike at the heart of Russia's power, wealth, and influence.
The sudden shutdown of Russia's main oil refinery has sent shockwaves far beyond the immediate blast zone, shaking the very foundation of the Russian economy and leaving Moscow scrambling to respond. Oil has long been the lifeblood of Russia's financial strength, the central artery through which its political ambitions and military operations are fueled. It is not just a product or a commodity, it is the single most critical pillar sustaining the Kremlin's grip on both domestic stability and international leverage. To see such a vital hub of energy production fall silent overnight is more than a setback. It is a wound that threatens to bleed the Russian system from within. The strike that disabled the refinery is not an isolated act of sabotage. It represents a calculated move to expose vulnerabilities that Russia once claimed did not exist. For years, Moscow projected an image of resilience, boasting about fortified energy infrastructure and its supposed ability to weather any external shock. Yet with one powerful blow, that narrative has collapsed. The shutdown has immediately disrupted production and distribution, choking the flow of oil to domestic markets and foreign buyers alike. Russia, which relies heavily on energy exports to fund its war machine, now finds itself facing a sudden hole in its revenue stream at a moment when every ruble matters for sustaining its military operations in Ukraine and its propaganda at home. The economic impact is immediate and devastating. Oil prices within Russia have spiked, creating panic among ordinary citizens who already struggle with the strain of sanctions and inflation. Shortages loom over fuel stations, sparking long queues, hoarding, and black market dealings. For the Russian economy, already strained by international isolation and the costs of war, this refinery attack could not have come at a worse time. Every day the facility remains offline, translates into millions of dollars lost, revenue that can never be recovered. That lost income directly affects the Kremlin's ability to fund operations, maintain its war machinery, and project an image of economic stability. Internationally, buyers who once relied on Russian energy are unsettled, questioning the reliability of their supplier. This instability not only reduces Russia's leverage on the global stage, but also undermines its ability to dictate terms to allies and partners who depend on its oil. Beyond the economics, the psychological effect is equally profound. The Kremlin has worked tirelessly to convince its population that the state is strong, unbreakable, and in full control, but the refinery strike has shattered that illusion. Russians who once believed in the invulnerability of their critical infrastructure now face the uncomfortable truth that their nation's greatest asset can be brought down swiftly and effectively. The attack sends ripples through every level of society, from the highest echelons of government to the average worker worried about how to fuel their car or heat their home. Panic in Moscow is not simply about the loss of oil revenue, it is about the collapse of trust in the state's promises. That collapse carries the risk of wider discontent, protests, and rising anger that the Kremlin may find increasingly difficult to suppress. The global community, meanwhile, views the shutdown as a turning point. Nations aligned against Russia see it as proof that the war effort is not only draining Moscow militarily, but is also exposing cracks in its economic armor. The attack demonstrates that Russia's energy empire, once seen as untouchable, is in fact vulnerable to precise, devastating strikes. It underscores that Moscow's economic engine can be targeted and disrupted, amplifying pressure on the Kremlin at a time when its resources are stretched thin. Investors, trading partners, and allies all see this refinery attack as a signal that Russia's grip on its own economic stability is slipping. The ramifications are clear. Russia's ability to project power, fund war, and maintain influence has been seriously weakened. What began as a single refinery shutting down has transformed into a symbol of fragility, proving that even the strongest pillars of Moscow's empire can crumble when struck at the right moment. The immediate aftermath of the refinery strike revealed something more telling than broken pipelines. and halted production. It exposed the depth of panic coursing through Moscow. In moments of crisis, governments reveal their true strength or fragility, and the Kremlin's reaction has been one of desperation cloaked in controlled statements and empty reassurances. Officials rushed to the airwaves to declare the situation under control, yet their hurried tone and visibly shaken demeanor betrayed the truth. Russia was caught off guard, and its leadership is scrambling to contain a crisis that threatens to spiral beyond the physical damage. The attack was not only a hit against infrastructure, it was a direct challenge to the Kremlin's claim of absolute security and stability. For years, Moscow has promised its citizens that critical national assets were untouchable, safeguarded by advanced defenses and ironclad intelligence. Now, with the refinery smoldering and production halted, those assurances ring hollow. Fear has gripped the capital, and the very heart of Russia's political machine is quaking under the weight of doubt. On the streets of Moscow, the panic is tangible. News of fuel shortages spreads faster than official updates, sparking long lines at gas stations and a rush to secure supplies before prices climb even higher. Ordinary Russians, already burdened by sanctions, rising costs and dwindling incomes, find themselves pushed further into uncertainty. What was once an inconvenience has now become a symbol of instability. Citizens can no longer rely on their government to shield them from the consequences of war. That realization is dangerous for the Kremlin, as public confidence is not simply an abstract concept, it is the foundation of domestic control. When citizens believe their leaders cannot protect them, cracks appear in the social fabric that can widen into unrest. The panic over fuel is more than just about energy, it is about the deep unease of a society that senses its government's failures. Inside the political elite, the fear runs deeper. For those who built their careers and fortunes on the illusion of Moscow's invulnerability, this refinery strike represents a direct threat to their power. The inner circle, long united by shared wealth and influence, now faces the unsettling reality that the Kremlin's grip is weakening. Whispers of dissatisfaction echo behind closed doors as ministers and oligarchs privately question whether Putin's war has overextended the nation's resources and jeopardized the very system that sustains them. For a government that thrives on projecting unity, even the faintest signs of dissent are dangerous. The attack has forced the elite to confront the possibility that their empire is not as strong as they believed, and that their personal security, economic and political, is no longer guaranteed. The panic is magnified by the Kremlin's heavy-handed response. In a bid to suppress dissent, security services have cracked down on critics, silencing voices that question the government's competence. Yet such repression only fuels suspicion and anger. The population sees the disconnect between official narratives of stability and the lived reality of shortages, price hikes, and uncertainty. This widening gap between propaganda and truth breeds cynicism, eroding the social contract that the Kremlin relies upon to maintain order. Every citizen who waits in a fuel line, every family forced to cut expenses, every worker who doubts their paycheck will hold its value, becomes a potential critic of a government that once boasted of unshakable strength. The refinery attack has also created a psychological shockwave that Moscow cannot easily erase. The city that once represented the unyielding center of Russian power now looks fragile, reactive, and fearful. Panic at the top trickles down into society, where people sense the vulnerability of their leaders. The illusion of control is perhaps the Kremlin's most powerful weapon, and with it shattered, the perception of strength dissolves. This perception is critical, not only for domestic stability, but also for how Russia is viewed internationally. The panic gripping Moscow reveals a government that can be rattled, a leadership that can be destabilized, and a society that is beginning to recognize its own fragility. The refinery may be silent, but the echoes of its destruction reverberate through the halls of power, reminding Russia that its control is not absolute, and its future is far from secure. The attack on Russia's main oil refinery has consequences that extend far beyond the borders of Moscow, creating ripples across the global stage and reshaping the way the world views the conflict. This was not just an assault on a facility, it was a message, carefully crafted and strategically delivered, that Russia's power is not invulnerable. For decades, Moscow relied on its vast energy resources to project dominance, exert influence, and secure loyalty from both allies and trading partners. Oil and gas have always been the twin pillars of Russia's geopolitical weight, giving it the ability to pressure Europe, fund its military expansion, and maintain its status as a global player. But with this refinery strike, that aura of strength has cracked. The image of Russia as an untouchable energy giant is now challenged, and the world is watching closely as the Kremlin struggles to maintain control over its own economic engine. For countries aligned with Ukraine and opposed to Moscow's aggression, this development is seen as a turning point in the conflict. The refinery's shutdown proves that Russia's critical infrastructure is not beyond reach, and that precise, calculated strikes can cripple the very core of its economy. This revelation emboldens those who have stood firm against Russian power, offering them a clear demonstration that Moscow's war machine is not limitless. It encourages further support for Ukraine, both militarily and financially, as allies see that strikes against vital assets can yield results far greater than battlefield skirmishes. International leaders now understand that Russia's vulnerabilities can be exploited, not only to weaken its ability to sustain war, but also to send a message of deterrence to other aggressors who might believe in their own invincibility. For Russia's partners, however, the message is much darker. Nations that once relied on Russian oil and gas as a stable source of energy now confront the unsettling truth that this supply is far less secure than they imagined. Countries that continued to trade with Russia despite Western sanctions must now reconsider their position, fearing disruptions that could damage their own economies. Even traditional allies begin to question whether Moscow can truly guarantee stability, or if dependence on Russian resources has become a liability. The refinery attack, therefore, does not just damage pipelines and production, it undermines trust, creating doubts in the very alliances and business ties that Russia has spent years cultivating. The perception of reliability, once a cornerstone of Russia's global leverage, has been shattered, and rebuilding that trust will be nearly impossible while the war rages on. The geopolitical consequences extend to markets as well. Energy traders and investors are watching this development with alarm, recalculating risks and rethinking strategies in light of Russia's apparent vulnerability. If one refinery can be brought offline, what does that say about the security of others scattered across the country? The idea that Russia's energy empire is an unbreakable fortress no longer holds. This changes the balance of global energy politics, giving leverage to competitors and diminishing Moscow's ability to dictate terms in negotiations. With every barrel of oil lost, Russia's influence shrinks, while the opportunities for rivals expand. The strike has reshaped the narrative of energy dominance, tilting the balance away from Moscow and toward those ready to exploit its weakened position. But perhaps the most significant impact of the attack is psychological. Russia has long thrived on the perception of strength, cultivating fear and respect through its control of energy resources and its ability to project power abroad. Now, with images of a burning refinery circulating across the world, that perception has been irreparably damaged. The Kremlin's enemies see opportunity, its allies see weakness, and its people see failure. The symbolic weight of this refinery shutdown is as heavy as its economic impact. It is a reminder that no matter how large or powerful a nation may appear, its foundations can be shaken if the right pressure points are struck. In the end, the geopolitical repercussions of this attack are not confined to markets or alliances. They reach into the very core of Russia's identity as a global power. What was once seen as a strength has been transformed into a glaring vulnerability. Every state, every observer, and every rival now knows that Moscow's economic engine can be targeted, and that knowledge changes the balance of the conflict. The strike has proven that Russia's dominance is not eternal, its resources not untouchable, and its control not absolute. For the world, it is a moment of revelation. For Moscow, it is a moment of reckoning. The refinery's destruction is more than just broken machinery. It is a symbol of Russia's crumbling illusion of invincibility. What was meant to project strength has become a glaring weakness, Moscow's panic is not only about oil, it is about survival, legitimacy, and the unraveling of control. As chaos deepens, one truth emerges clearly: Russia is no longer untouchable, and every strike brings the war closer to its heart.